In a wilderness carved by silence and shadow, an orphaned foal stood alone, until a wild mare emerged from the mist, not to save him, but to show him how to survive. The wind had shifted. A low hum rippled across the hills, ruffling the tall grasses as dark clouds stacked themselves along the western horizon. The mare had sensed the change long before the first crack of thunder split the sky. Her ears twitched, head raised, nostrils flaring as she stood alert amid the sea of green. Beside her, the foal nestled against her flank, unaware of what brewed in the sky above, warm, content, still new to the world. His name, though no one had spoken it, was Koa. He had never wandered far from his mother's side. In his short life, she was the center of his universe, her warmth, her scent, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat when he slept against her chest. Everything else, the birds, the trees, the wind, was background noise, beautiful perhaps, but secondary to the comfort she gave him. He'd only been alive for a month, and to Koa, it felt like he had always been safe. But safety is a fragile thing in the wild. The first bolt of lightning lanced through the sky like a spear. It struck a far-off ridge, but the sound, the sheer violence of it, sent the entire herd into motion. Heads snapped up, hooves shuffled. In an instant they were moving, a mass of muscle, panic, and instinct. The older mares called to their young, gathering them in a stampede that surged toward the valley's edge. Koa didn't understand. One moment he had been standing close to his mother's legs, the next he was pushed aside by the swell of bodies. He tried to stay close, but the ground was slick with rain and the air reeked of fear. His legs, still gangly and uncertain, failed him. He slipped, just once. But it was enough. By the time he scrambled to his feet, soaked and shivering, his mother was gone. He called for her, over and over, his voice shrill and trembling, carried away by the wind. But no reply came. Only thunder, rolling endlessly across the hills, like the growl of some invisible predator. He tried to follow the herd's trail, but the rain had turned the path into mush. The scents were washed away, the hoofprints filled with water. And so the foal wandered, alone. The days that followed were a blur. Hunger dulled everything. The sky, the grass, even his fear. Koa stayed near the river at first, drinking from shallow pools and nibbling on what he could find. But he was young, too young to be alone. He lay down often, hoping sleep would bring back his mother, or at least carry him somewhere warmer. Nights were the worst. Cold crept into his bones like frost. He dreamed of warmth, of soft wickers and the slow rising and falling of his mother's chest beside him. When he woke, the silence was unbearable. It was on the fourth morning that he gave up calling for her. Instead, he walked. Each step was an effort, hooves heavy in the dew-soaked earth. He passed groves of trees where birds called overhead, and once he startled a fox who stared at him curiously before disappearing into the underbrush. No threat, but no help either. The world had little to offer a lonely, orphaned foal, but something was watching him. She had seen him from afar, a lone figure against the hill, a stray mare, gray with a black mane and old scars etched across her flank like a history she didn't speak of. Her name had been forgotten long ago if she ever had one. She didn't belong to a herd, didn't want one. She had lived alone, for seasons now, choosing silence over the chaos of company. But something about the foal stopped her. He was small, too small to survive alone, and his walk, the way his legs shook, the way he blinked slowly and bowed his head when the wind blew, told her he was close to breaking. There was a desperation in his steps that she recognized. Once she had walked like that too. She didn't approach him right away. Instead, she followed at a distance, her hooves silent on the wet ground. She watched as he stumbled near a rocky stream, nearly falling in. She waited as he collapsed beneath a tree, lying still for hours, chest barely moving. That night, as the sky cleared and stars blinked above, she stepped closer. The foal stirred as her shadow fell over him. His eyes opened slowly, glazed and half-dreaming. For a moment, he thought he saw his mother. The shape, the scent, the heat. But no. This mare was older, leaner, with a coat dulled by dust and years. He flinched instinctively. The mare did not touch him. She simply stood, blocking the wind. He didn't move away. He didn't have the strength. By morning, she was still there. When he rose, swaying on thin legs, she stepped back, allowing him space. He expected her to leave, like everything else had. But she didn't. Instead, she turned and walked, a few steps forward, then paused, looking back at him. An invitation. Koa stared, unsure. But there was something about the way she stood, firm, certain, steady, that quieted the panic inside him. She didn't nuzzle him or call to him like his mother would have. She didn't fuss or crowd. She simply waited. And so, with a trembling breath, Koa followed. They moved slowly at first, across broken fields and under pale sun. The mare didn't lead him in a straight line. She curved around the ridges, stopping often near stream beds or under groves where edible shoots still grew. When he lagged, she waited. When he lay down, she stood nearby. She never pushed him to move faster than he could. But she also never let him give up. That evening, as they settled near a quiet glade, Koa crept a little closer. He still didn't fully trust her, but the warmth of her presence, quiet and unyielding, pulled at something in him. She didn't look at him when he pressed his body lightly against her side, but she didn't move away either. The stars were clearer that night. The air smelled of pine and distant rain. For the first time in days, Koa slept without dreaming of being alone. When he woke the next morning, she was gone. Panic returned like a fire in his chest. He whinnied, loud and broken, stumbling to his feet, his heart hammering. But then he heard it, the soft rustle of grass, the snap of a twig. She was nearby, just beyond the grove, returning with a mouthful of leaves she dropped gently at his feet. Not a mother, but something else. Something steady. The next days were easier. His legs grew stronger. He nursed from puddles less and grazed more. He began to mimic her. The way she watched the wind, the way she flicked her ears toward danger. She didn't speak, but her every move taught him something. He realized she had a rhythm, a kind of quiet language of motion. When she dipped, her head slightly, it meant rest. When her ears turned back but her body stayed relaxed, it meant a warning, not a threat. She never pushed him to come closer, but slowly, he began to follow her more closely. By the end of the week, he trailed her like a shadow. And one evening, after a day of travel along a ridge overlooking a distant valley, something shifted. They stood together, side by side, the wind blowing across the cliffs. Below them stretched a wide basin, greener than any place Koa had ever seen. A stream wove through it like silver thread, and the grass shimmered like velvet in the dying light. The mare gazed at it for a long time, and when she turned to him, her eyes were unreadable. But she walked forward without pause, down the slope, toward the valley. Koa hesitated only a moment before following. He didn't know it yet, but the place she had brought him to was more than just shelter. It was a place of beginnings, a place the wild ones spoke of in quiet moments. The safe valley, they called it. A place the storms forgot, where predators seldom roamed, and where wounded creatures came to heal. Koa had lost his mother to the storm. But he had found something else in the silence that followed, something unexpected, and perhaps even more powerful, a guide. And slowly he was beginning to trust again. The valley welcomed them with a hush, not silence exactly, the kind of quiet that lives, breathes, and pulses just beneath the surface, the whisper of leaves brushing each other, the distant call of cranes from the marsh, the steady murmur of a stream weaving through stone and root. It was peace, but not empty. A silence that held things, like memory and rest and healing. For Koa, it was the first time the world felt wide but not terrifying. The stray mare, his silent guardian, stepped lightly across the grass. She moved with an ease that came from knowing this place well. Her hooves avoided the slick moss on instinct, her head turned toward the breeze just before it shifted. She didn't look back often, but when she did, it was enough. A glance to check that Koa followed. A small nod. Nothing more. The first night in the valley was warm. The earth held the sun's heat like a blanket. Koa lay curled in a patch of tall grass that smelled sweet and rich, breathing deep, his limbs twitching in sleep. He dreamed of light, of soft rain, of his mother. But the pain had begun to dull, like a bruise fading under skin. He didn't cry when he woke, not anymore. The mare grazed nearby, ever watchful. She slept only in short spells, her ears flicking at even the gentlest rustle. Predators rarely came to this place. It was too open, too exposed. But she had learned never to assume safety, no matter how sweet the wind. Koa noticed everything. The way she always chose a resting spot with an escape route. The way she tested new water with a single sniff before drinking. The way she always faced uphill when she lay down, so she could rise faster if needed. She never said a word, but she was teaching him everything. Mornings began slowly. Dew clung to their coats like pearls. Koa followed her to the stream where they drank in silence, their reflections soft and rippling. She ate first, then watched while he grazed. When he wandered too far, she made a low, breathy sound that wasn't quite a neigh, more of a whisper. He knew, instinctively, that it meant come back. He obeyed. Sometimes she disappeared for an hour or two, slipping into the trees along the valley's edge. Koa would wait, heart fluttering, always half afraid she wouldn't return. But she always did, usually with something in her mouth. Bitter herbs, dried grasses, once a feather long and white, which she dropped by his hooves without explanation. Koa didn't know what it meant. A gift, maybe, or a memory. She didn't talk about her past. Horses don't tell stories the way humans do, not with words. But it lived in her body, in the scars along her ribs, in the limp she carried only when she thought no one was watching. Some injury from years ago, a chase, a fight, a loss. Koa never asked, but he began to understand that she had lived through storms of her own. They grew closer in small ways. He stopped flinching when she came near. She let him walk beside her, not behind. Sometimes, when he lay down, she stood over him like a sentry. Other times, they both rested under the same tree, not touching, but close enough to hear each other breathe. And slowly, trust grew between them, not loudly, but like moss on stone. There was a moment, 2 weeks after. They'd entered the valley that changed something between them. It was a still morning. Mist clung low, curling around the trees like fogged glass. Koa had been wandering near the edge of a narrow ravine, chasing the scent of wildflowers. He didn't see the snake until it struck. It wasn't venomous. Just startled. A whip of scales, and teeth that grazed his shoulder before slithering away into the grass. But Koa panicked. He bolted, eyes wide, legs flailing, galloping blindly across uneven ground. The world became a blur of green and fear. Then, a crack. His leg slipped between two rocks, wrenching to the side. He hit the ground hard. Breath knocked from his lungs, pain lancing through his limb like fire. He lay there, trembling, too shocked to even cry out. She came running. Faster than he'd ever seen her move, the mare appeared from the trees in a streak of gray. Her ears pinned flat, nostrils flaring, eyes scanning the grass. She reached him, stopped, breathed hard through her teeth. Koa tried to stand, whimpered. His leg gave out beneath him. She didn't scold him, didn't nudge or force. She simply stood beside him, lowered her head, and waited. Her breath was hot against his cheek, steady and close. After a moment, she began to make that same low sound. The breath whisper he'd heard before, the one that meant, "Come back." He closed his eyes. And he did. She stayed with him all day. He couldn't walk far, so she grazed nearby, keeping the sun at his back and the flies off his wounds. She pressed her shoulder against his when he shivered. When the pain returned at dusk, she brought more of those bitter herbs, and he, trusting now, chewed them without resistance. In 3 days he was limping. In 5, walking. In 8, he was running again. After that, Koa never strayed too far from her. He began to speak more, not with words, but with his body. He would bump her shoulder gently when she came close, nuzzle her neck. Once, after a bath in the river, he leapt playfully into her path, tail high, eyes bright. She didn't return the gesture, not exactly, but her ears perked. Her tail swished once, a reply, and then came the wind. It returned in force one evening, sweeping through the valley in spirals, bending the trees and flattening the grass. The sky darkened, not with storm, not yet, but with something that felt like warning. The mare stood still as it passed, eyes closed, listening. Koa watched her, heart quickening. The last time the wind had changed like this, his world had fallen apart. But she didn't run. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she turned toward the north edge of the valley, where a narrow pass disappeared between two cliffs, and she began to walk. Koa hesitated. He looked back at the place they'd called home for almost a month now, the trees, the stream, the glade. It felt like leaving a part of himself behind, but she didn't stop or look back, so he followed. The path was steep, lined with sharp stone and thin ledges. Koa's legs shook again, but not from hunger this time, from memory. He thought of the herd, the lightning, the sound of his mother's voice calling out, then silenced by the wind. He almost turned back. But then she paused. She looked at him, and for the first time, truly looked. Not with evaluation or instruction, but something deeper, something warmer. Her eyes met his, and for a breathless second, he saw her. All of her. Not just the stray mare, but the life behind her, the storms, the battles, the stubborn will to keep going. She waited until he caught up, and they climbed together. At the top of the pass was a new valley, wilder than the last, with tall golden grass and cliffs that echoed with the calls of wild goats. But it was safe, quiet. The kind of place only the oldest horses knew. She led him to a shaded cove near a spring, where the ground was soft and cool. They would rest here. That night, Koa didn't lie beside her. He curled into her side, tucking his head beneath her neck. She stiffened at first, as if unsure. Then, slowly, she lowered her chin across his back, and together they slept. The wind came again in the morning, howling past the cliffs. But this time, Koa didn't startle. He stood beside her and watched it pass, his mane tousled, eyes clear. He was beginning to understand the world again, not as something to fear, but something to learn. And the mare, once a shadow, a mystery, had become something more, not his mother, but his home. The days turned gold, not all at once, but slowly, as if the world were painting itself in softer tones just for them. The summer began to fade, replaced by early touches of autumn, leaves blushing at their edges, the air sharpening its teeth just enough to be noticed. But in the valley, time still moved gently. Koa had grown. His chestnut coat had deepened, glinting in the morning light with a healthy sheen. His legs, once wobbly and too long for his frame, had found their rhythm. He ran now, not out of fear, but joy. He galloped for the wind, for the feel of his hooves pounding the soft earth, for the sound of the trees answering him in rustling applause. The mare watched, always a few paces behind, never in the way. She still moved like a ghost, quiet, deliberate, knowing exactly where to place her hooves. Her own body had grown leaner with the travel, but her eyes had changed most of all. They no longer looked beyond everything. Now they looked at him. There was a rhythm to their days. They rose with the sun. Koa would stretch, yawn, nudge her flank softly. She would answer with that same subtle noise, the warm, breathy sound that had once meant caution, now softened into something like affection. They drank at the spring, moved through the valley in slow, purposeful circles, grazing, listening, learning. Koa asked questions in the only way he could, with his steps, with how he followed, with the moments he wandered just a little too far, pretending not to look back until he caught her eye. She answered with movement, with patience, with presence. But there were things even she couldn't protect him from. One afternoon, while tracing a path along the northern ridge, Koa froze. The scent hit him like a punch, sharp, wild, unfamiliar. Not deer, not fox, wolves. They weren't close. The wind carried them from farther off, a distant trail, not fresh. But instinct stirred like a long-buried warning bell. His ears pinned, back, legs locked. He turned to the mare. She had stopped too. Her head was high, nostrils flared. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she stepped toward the edge of the ridge and looked down. Koa followed, cautious. Below them, far beyond the valley's reach, a pack moved through the tall grass. 6, maybe 7. Shadowy shapes flickering between light and leaf. They didn't notice the horses. They were headed west, away from the hills. But their presence left a scar in the moment, a reminder. The world still held danger. Koa watched them go. Something in him trembled, not just fear, but the beginning of understanding. That life outside this valley moved on, that the threats his mother once shielded him from still lingered, waiting beyond the safety of green slopes and morning mist. The mare didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her gaze followed the wolves until they were gone. Then she turned, nudged him gently, and led him back down the slope. They returned to the spring, but the mood had shifted. That night, Koa didn't play. He stayed close, shoulder to shoulder with her beneath the pine trees, ears flicking at every noise. When he laid down, it was with his body curled tighter than usual. And she stayed standing. All night, she didn't sleep. The next day, the mare changed their path. They didn't circle the valley like usual. Instead, she led him deeper into the forest that bordered the western edge, a place they hadn't explored before. The trees grew taller there, ancient pines with trunks wide enough to shelter a deer. Their needles carpeted the ground in silence, muffling each step. At first, Koa didn't understand, but as the forest thickened, the trees revealed something strange. Markings, scratches on the bark, low-hanging branches broken deliberately, piles of smooth stones stacked in odd formations. Not natural, not wind-blown, not wolf-made. These were signs, messages from others. The mare paused at one such marker, a fallen tree, its bark stripped clean, bearing an old hoof print etched deep in the wood. She touched it with her nose. Koa watched, confused. Then she turned, and for the first time, she led him off the trail entirely, through thickets, across a dry creek bed, up a slope covered in moss so thick it felt like velvet. And then, a clearing. Not large, but unmistakably shaped, a circle of stone, half swallowed by vines, the remnants of what had once been shelter, not built by human hands, but shaped by hooves. The earth was pressed in places even after seasons of abandonment. The center held the bones of a fire, not flame, but stories, echoes. The mare stepped into the circle and stopped. Koa followed her, breath caught in his throat. This place felt different, not sacred, but remembered. She didn't speak, but she moved slowly, touching one stone, then another, her gaze unfocused, lost in memory. And then she lay down. It startled him. She hadn't rested in front of him like this before, not in the open, not in a place so exposed. But now she stretched out in the sun, her legs folded beneath her, her eyes half-lidded, not asleep. But still, Koa circled her once, twice, unsure. Then he stepped closer, lay beside her. Their sides brushed, their breaths fell into sync, and in that quiet something passed between them. Not a memory, but something older. As if, for a moment, she shared her past with him not in words or images, but in weight. The weight of all she had survived. The friends she had lost, the foal she once knew. Perhaps her own, perhaps not. Koa didn't know, didn't need to. He only knew that this place meant something to her, and now to him. When they rose again, she didn't lead him away immediately. They lingered in the grove, grazing, listening. At one point, a bird landed on a branch above them, a blue jay, bold and curious. Koa looked up, startled, but the mare just watched it, her gaze calm. When they finally left, the sun was sinking, behind the trees. The air had cooled and the shadows stretched long across the ground. Koa followed her closely, steps light. That night, he dreamed of the circle of stones, of stories left behind, and of a mare who had found her voice in silence. In the days that followed, the wind shifted again, not dangerously, but with purpose. The trees whispered more often. The mornings came later. A flock of geese passed overhead, honking their farewells to the season. Even the valley animals began to move with urgency, squirrels racing, foxes trotting with purpose, the deer restless, and quick to vanish. Winter was coming. Koa didn't fully understand, but the mare did. She began preparing. They moved less, conserving energy. She found a new resting place, a thicket near the south slope, sheltered from wind and half surrounded by stone. It wasn't much, but it was warmer and hidden each day. She returned to the forest's edge, sometimes gone for hours. When she came back, her coat was flecked with burrs, her mane tangled with branches. But she always brought something: dried root, hardened moss, clusters of bark thick with lichen. Koa watched her, puzzled. Then one day she returned with something wrapped in her mouth, a strand of old woven grass, knotted tightly at the end. It had no scent, but it looked crafted, touched by intention, not wild. She dropped it in front of Koa and stared at it, and for the first time since he'd known her, she made a sound, a real sound, a low, broken nicker, not fear, not warning, memory. Koa stepped closer, touched the object with his nose. It didn't mean anything to him, but it had meant something to someone, perhaps the mare, perhaps the foal she once lost. perhaps another life entirely. She had been someone before she became the silent guide, someone with a herd, a place, a name. Koa would never know that name, but now she was his, not by birth, by bond, and the bond had grown roots, deep and strong and quiet, like the pines. One morning, Koa woke to a world rimmed in silver. The grass crackled under his hooves, each blade outlined in a thin shimmer of ice. The sun hadn't yet risen over the ridgeline, and the valley lay in a quiet, breathless hush. Koa exhaled, watching his breath swirl in front of him like mist. The mare was already up, her body dusted with frost like powdered sugar. She stood, still facing the sky, her ears flicking to the rhythm of some sound Koa couldn't hear. The cold didn't seem to touch her, or perhaps she was too used to it to show discomfort. Koa stepped forward, but slowly. The cold felt strange on his legs, numbing. He didn't fear it, exactly, but it reminded him of something he didn't have a name for, an emptiness that whispered of endings. She turned as he approached. Her eyes met his, unreadable, but steady. Then she nudged him toward the thicket they'd claimed as shelter. Today would be different. As the cold deepened, so did the stillness of the valley. The birds, once a constant chorus, had grown silent. Only crows remained, dark flecks against the sky, their calls sharp and short. The rabbits had vanished into burrows. Even the deer came only at dusk, moving cautiously, as if unsure the world would still be there the next day. Food grew harder to find. The grasses had dulled. The stream froze thinly at the edges. Koa pawed at the earth with his hooves, learning. To dig, to uncover the roots the mare had shown him weeks before. She watched him closely, not interfering but always near. He had grown more confident, but she never stopped guarding him, not for a moment. One afternoon, as the wind howled between the trees, Koa found something strange while digging near the ridge, a cluster of bones half buried in the frozen soil, not old, still white. A rabbit, perhaps, or something larger. He stared at them for a long time. The mare approached, sniffed them once, then looked away. It was a lesson. Everything here was a lesson. Winter didn't take things cruelly. It simply took. Without apology, without exception, Koa began to understand. In the evenings, they stood close for warmth. Their breath made clouds that curled and vanished above them. Sometimes the mare would press her body to his, and he would lean into her flank without shame. He no longer pretended not to need her. In this season, they needed each other. They spoke more, in their way. One night, as snow fell in delicate spirals, Koa nickered softly, a sound he hadn't made since his first days in the valley. The mare turned, ears pricked. He made the sound again, longer this time. She didn't answer. Not with sound, but she moved to him, touched her nose to his, stood there until the snow thickened. That was answer enough. Then one morning they woke to silence so deep it felt heavy. A thick blanket of snow had fallen overnight. The trees were cloaked in white, branches bowing under the weight. The sky was the color of wool, and the world had changed. Koa bounded through the snow, kicking it high into the air, racing in looping, joyful arcs. He slid, stumbled, laughed in his body, tail high, ears forward. The cold no longer frightened him. It thrilled him. Every crunch of snow beneath his hooves felt like a song. The mare followed at her own pace. She didn't play, not like he did, but her eyes were soft as she watched him. She had brought him here for this, not just to survive, to live. They traveled little now. Every step took effort, and food was sparse. The valley had become a map of memories, where the bark was softest, where the roots hid deepest, where the wind came least. One day, they crossed the frozen stream. Koa stepped carefully, watching the ice crack and shift beneath his weight. The mare, lighter, moved with ease. On the far side, they found a cluster of trees Koa had never noticed before. Dense, tangled, protected from the wind. Beneath the branches lay a space cleared by animals long gone. They made it theirs. The days shortened. Nights stretched long and slow. Snow fell, melted, fell again. Time began to lose its shape, and then came the storm. It arrived without warning. The sky went dark at noon. The wind roared down from the mountains, lashing through the valley with a fury Koa hadn't known existed. Snow fell sideways, thick as fog, erasing the world one breath at a time. They ran, not away, to safety, to the thicket they'd claimed, now hidden beneath a foot of snow. Koa slipped once, yelping, but the mare was beside him in an instant, her shoulder steadying his. Inside the shelter they huddled close. The wind screamed through the trees, bending them until their trunks creaked. The world howled, snow piled higher, closing them in, and still they stayed. Koa shook with cold, but not fear. Not this time, not with her beside him. At some point, he drifted into sleep, his body curled tightly, pressed against hers. In dreams, he saw his mother again, not as she was in her final moments, but alive, strong, her coat shining. She looked at him, and then stepped aside. Behind her stood the mare, not as a stranger, but as something more. The dream faded, but when Koa woke, he felt different, older, changed. The storm passed. They emerged into a world transformed. The snowdrifts were high, the trees stripped, the sky clear and sharp. Silence reigned, but it was not the silence of death, it was the silence of survival. Koa looked at the mare and something passed between them, not just gratitude, not just relief, pride. They had weathered the worst together. In the days that followed, Koa grew stronger. He began leading their walks, checking paths before she did, testing ice with his hoof before stepping onto it. The mare let him, not because she was tired, but because he was ready. One night, as they stood beneath a moon bright enough to cast shadows on snow, the mare lifted her head to the wind, and she neighed. Not the whispering call she had used before. A full sound, sharp, clear, carrying across the valley like a trumpet. Koa startled. He had never heard her voice like that. She stood tall, neck arched, ears forward. She called again, and the sound echoed off the ridges. He stepped closer. "What is it?" he asked in his own way. A soft nudge, a questioning nicker. She looked at him, and for a moment in her eyes, he saw it. Hope. The snow would melt. The grass would return. The valley would live again, and maybe, just maybe, so would something else. The snow didn't vanish all at once. It withdrew slowly like a tide receding with each lengthening day. First from the trees, branches dripping in the sun, their tips revealed in damp browns and grays. Then from the ridges where the sun clung longest. Last, from the hollows and shaded places where winter's grip lingered, reluctant to let go. Koa watched it happen with the reverence of someone seeing magic for the first time. The first patch of green startled him. He had been nosing at the earth, searching as he always did, when his hoof struck something soft. He stepped back, blinked. Grass. Thin, pale, but real. The mare saw it too. She didn't react outwardly, but her eyes softened in a way that said, she noticed that it mattered. And after that, spring came faster, not just in weather, but in the animals. The birds returned, their songs tentative at first, then bold. Squirrels emerged, blinking from their nests. Deer tiptoed through the forest again, their coats thick but restless, shedding in the breeze. One morning, Koa awoke to find butterflies. They fluttered near the stream where the ice had finally broken. He stood transfixed, watching the way. Their wings caught the sun. The water bubbled beside them, rushing as if eager to stretch its voice again. It was a time of return, of renewal. But also, Koa began to realize, of change. He had grown. The playful foal who once ran in circles and, startled at wind, was now taller, surer. His body had filled out, muscles tracing his frame like faint rivers under his coat. His legs were no longer too long. They belonged to him now. And more than anything, he felt it. The pull. Not away from the valley. Not yet. But a stirring inside. Him. A curiosity. A longing for something just beyond the ridgeline. The mare noticed. She didn't say anything. She never did. But Koa saw the way she watched him now, not as a foal to protect, but as something blooming, as a story unfolding. And she had decisions to make. One evening, as twilight crept over the hills, the mare led him beyond the stream, past the familiar shelters, the ridges, even the grove of old stones they had visited once and never returned. They walked in silence. It was not a farewell, but it felt close. At the far end of the valley, they came to a rise where the trees thinned. Beyond it, Koa could see the distant horizon, a sweep of hills, valleys, forests, stretching like pages of an unread book. The wind blew there, freer than anywhere else. The mare stepped aside. Koa stood at the edge of the rise and looked out. He didn't understand everything, not yet, but he knew this. The world was wide, and this valley, beautiful as it was not the end of it. He turned to her. She met his eyes, walked to him, and, for the first time, rested her head against his neck. Not in instruction, not in comfort, in recognition. They stood there a long time. The sun slipped lower, washing them. In amber light, the birds quieted. Somewhere far off, an owl called. And when they returned to the shelter that night, Koa knew something had changed between them. Not broken, but loosened. She had given him the valley. Now, he would give her something too. Fupper. Next day, he rose before the sun. The mare was still asleep, and not deeply, but enough. He didn't want to wake her. He stood a long time watching her breathe, remembering how she had stood for him when he couldn't, how she had taught him to listen, to move, to survive. He stepped away quietly, not running, just walking. He climbed the ridge where they had stood the night before. The world beyond it called to him, not as a shout, but as a whisper. He listened, and then he went. The wind met him like an old friend. The trees opened. The sky spread above him like a new kind of shelter. He didn't. Look back, not out of coldness, but trust. She would be there, always, and she was. Back in the valley, the mare stood at the ridge, watching. Her silhouette was still, her eyes following the path he took, even as he disappeared into the trees. She didn't call. She didn't follow. She turned and walked back into the pines. The valley would need her again one day, and Koa, wherever he was headed, would carry her with him, in the way he stepped, in the way he listened to wind, in the way he trusted the silence. Spring bloomed around them both, in separate places, but always, forever, joined, in the whispering bond between a mare who had lost and a foal who had found. The end.